Today we'll dive into more chilling cases of 5 American tourists who went missing in Mexico. Each story reveals unsettling details and unanswered questions. We'll cover what happened before, during, and after their disappearances. Stay with us as we explore these real-life mysteries and consider the disturbing possibilities of what might have happened to them. It was April 11, 2016, in Oaxaca, Mexico. Jenny Chen, a 26-year-old Chinese citizen, had been backpacking through the country since March. She was adventurous, passionate about exploring new places, and loved meeting new people. On this day, she was headed out of the city, planning to meet her husband, Jonathan Reinhardt, in Cancun on April 15th. This would be a reunion after her solo travel adventure. But Jenny never made it to Cancun. Jenny was known for her frequent updates on social media. She posted photos regularly, sharing her journey with friends and family. She also made daily calls to her mother. But on April 11th, those updates and calls abruptly stopped. Concerned, Jonathan waited for her in Cancun. When she didn't show up, he knew something was terribly wrong. Jonathan, a Seattle resident, and Jenny had been together for 8 years. They met in China when Jonathan was there for work. Jenny had attended an event called English Corner by a lake, a popular gathering place for Chinese people wanting to practice their English. Jonathan recalled how Jenny had asked him if he liked Kentucky Fried Chicken. They exchanged phone numbers, went on a date, and soon fell in love. They married in 2012, and Jenny moved to the United States in 2013. She was on her path to becoming a U.S. citizen. Back in Cancun, Jonathan's concern grew with each passing hour. He contacted both the U.S. and Chinese embassies in Mexico, but their responses were not encouraging. The U.S. State Department offered little help since Jenny was not yet a U.S. citizen. The Chinese authorities were equally unhelpful. Frustrated, Jonathan took matters into his own hands. He hired a private investigator in Mexico, using funds raised through a GoFundMe campaign. The investigator managed to trace Jenny's movements on April 11th. She had traveled from Oaxaca City to Juchitán, a small town about 6 hours away. In Juchitán, she stayed with a local family and was last seen the following day, April 12th, trying to hitch a ride to Cancun along Highway 185. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Jenny getting into a Corona beer truck around 2 p.m. on April 12th. The driver had stopped on the side of the highway, waved Jenny over, and offered her a ride. This truck was supposed to take a different route to avoid a blockade by teachers, which was happening on the main road to Cancun. However, the truck headed in the opposite direction, a detail that puzzled everyone involved in the search. Jonathan's investigator reached out to Grupo Modelo, the company that owned the Corona truck, but getting any useful information from them proved to be a hard task. For weeks, they did not respond. When they finally did, the information was vague and unhelpful. They confirmed that there were 7 Corona trucks operating in the area on April 12th, but refused to release the names of the drivers or any other details that could help identify the one Jenny had boarded. Desperate for answers, Jonathan launched a social media campaign, urging friends and supporters to put pressure on Grupo Modelo through Facebook and Twitter. He also continued to raise funds through GoFundMe to cover the escalating costs of the private investigation. The situation was emotionally and financially draining. Jonathan had to balance his search efforts with his job and everyday responsibilities. His employer was supportive, but the stress was immense. Despite all these efforts, tangible leads were few and far between. The Mexican authorities were not much help either. While they issued an alert for information on Jenny, their efforts seemed dull. They suggested that Jenny could have taken a more dangerous northerly route through Veracruz State, known for its violence and disappearances, adding another layer of complexity and fear to the already harrowing situation. Jonathan's private investigator continued to dig for clues. The most promising lead remained the Corona truck sighting. Witnesses had clearly seen Jenny getting into the truck, but the trail went cold after that. Jonathan believed that the driver of that truck held the key to finding Jenny. However, Grupo Modelo's reluctance to cooperate fully was a significant roadblock. In a bid to get more information, Jonathan traveled to Mexico multiple times. He hoped to gain more support from the local Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Oaxaca and tried to retrace Jenny's steps himself. He even offered a reward for any information leading to her whereabouts, hoping that it might encourage someone to come forward. By May 24th, nearly 6 weeks after Jenny's disappearance, Grupo Modelo finally agreed to work with Jonathan and the investigators. They scheduled a call with the police, Jonathan, and the private investigator, but the information they provided was still limited, and the names of the drivers remained undisclosed. Jonathan remained determined. He believed that if he could get the names and photos of the Corona truck drivers, they could identify the one Jenny had been with. This person was the last known individual to see Jenny, and Jonathan was convinced they held the answers he desperately needed. Throughout this ordeal, Jonathan's love for Jenny and his hope for her safe return never wavered. He continued to advocate for her, pushing for more action from the authorities and Grupo Modelo. He also kept the public informed through the Facebook group Help Find Jenny, sharing updates and asking for continued support. As the search continues, many questions remain unanswered. What happened to Jenny after she got into the Corona truck? Why was Grupo Modelo so reluctant to provide information? Did the driver have any malicious intent, or was he just offering a ride to a stranded traveler? These questions weigh heavily on Jonathan and everyone involved in the search. It was April 3, 2024, when Edmund Bradley Solomon III and his wife, Mimi, disembarked from the Royal Caribbean cruise ship, Icon of the Seas, at the bustling port of Cozumel, Mexico. The couple, in their mid-60s, had been enjoying a much-anticipated 7-day cruise, a final big vacation following Edmund's diagnosis with frontotemporal dementia. Edmund, known affectionately as Brad, had spent over 20 years as a critical care nurse at Ralph H. Johnson VA Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina. He was now retired, and the diagnosis had significantly altered his behavior, though his memory remained mostly intact. Brad's wife, Mimi, also a nurse and a recent breast cancer survivor, had become his primary caregiver, navigating the challenges brought on by his condition. This cruise was meant to be a break from the routine, a chance to relax and enjoy each other's company. As they moved through the terminal, Brad and Mimi decided to take a quick restroom break before heading out to explore Cozumel. Mimi entered the women's restroom while Brad headed to the men's. Moments later, when Mimi emerged, Brad was nowhere to be seen. Initially, she assumed he was still inside and waited outside the restroom. But as the minutes ticked by, her concern grew. She asked a family member who had accompanied them to check the men's restroom, but Brad was not there. Panic set in. Mimi and the family member searched the immediate area but found no sign of Brad. Knowing his condition could cause him to act unpredictably, they feared the worst. Savannah Miller, Brad's daughter, later recounted the ordeal, explaining how the family knew immediately that Brad was lost. News of Brad's disappearance quickly spread among the cruise passengers and crew. The local authorities were notified and a search was initiated. Brad was last seen wearing a white t-shirt, gray shorts, dark sunglasses, and a blue hat. He also wore a GPS necklace, but it only worked within a 33-foot range of Mimi's phone, rendering it useless once he wandered out of range. Around 2:30 p.m., a taxi driver reported seeing a man who matched Brad's description on the road to Isla de la Pasión. The driver said the man flagged him down and requested a ride to a road with beach access. When he realized he had no money, Brad paid the fare with his wristwatch. This sighting provided a glimmer of hope and a critical clue about Brad's whereabouts. Back in the United States, Savannah, Brad's daughter, and other family members dropped everything to fly to Cozumel and join the search. They were desperate to find Brad, who was now lost in an unfamiliar place, vulnerable due to his dementia. The family reached out to the U.S. Embassy and Consulate in Mexico City, and a GoFundMe page was set up to aid in the search efforts. The fundraiser quickly surpassed its goal, raising over $15,000. In Cozumel, the search effort was massive and coordinated. Local police, the military, and volunteers scoured the island. Authorities used helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, search dogs, and even an infrared camera in their efforts. The search spanned from city streets to jungles, beaches, and resorts. Civil protection vehicles broadcast messages from Mimi, pleading for any information on Brad's whereabouts. As the days passed, the search took a toll on the family's mental state. Savannah shared her anguish on social media, expressing her fear and exhaustion. She urged people to keep sharing their story to ensure it remained in the public eye. Despite the intensive search, promising leads turned into dead ends. Sightings of Brad were reported, but none were confirmed. The local community was supportive, with many joining the search efforts, but the frustration of false leads weighed heavily on the family. Brad's condition made the situation even more challenging. His frontotemporal dementia affected his behavior, making him act erratically and say odd things. He often walked quickly, head down, appearing confident despite being lost and scared. He was likely avoiding help, not knowing how to process the situation or respond to unfamiliar people. Days turned into weeks, and the search shifted from rescue to recovery. The number of searchers dwindled, but those who remained were dedicated. They combed through every possible location, including parks, abandoned buildings, and even Mayan ruins. Despite their efforts, Brad remained missing. On February 16, 2024, John Gamboa boarded his flight to Mexico City. The day was sunny and warm in Houston, where John lived with his mother, Fermina. 30-year-old John was a U.S. Air Force veteran, having served for 5 years. He was no stranger to travel and adventure, and this trip was supposed to be a simple, quick one. He planned to retrieve his belongings from Mexico City, where he had been based the previous year, and return home by February 18th. But John never made it back. On the morning of February 16th, John had called his mother to let her know he was about to board his flight. Fermina wished him a safe trip and reminded him to call her when he landed. However, that call never came. Instead, Fermina received a troubling notification from USAA Bank later that day. Someone was attempting to access John's bank account. Concerned, she tried to reach him multiple times, but there was no response. The last confirmed sighting of John was in the early hours of February 17th. He was seen hailing a taxi outside Montana Disco in Mexico City. According to witnesses, he was wearing a maroon shirt and tan pants. He also had a tattoo of Jesus on his chest and an infinity symbol on his index finger. After that, John seemed to vanish without a trace. As February 18th came and went without any word from John, Fermina's anxiety grew. She contacted his employer, who confirmed that John had not logged in for work. This was completely out of character for him. Fermina reached out to friends and acquaintances in Mexico City, but no one had seen or heard from John. Desperation set in as she realized her son was truly missing. Fermina reported John's disappearance to the FBI, who quickly issued a missing person bulletin. They stated that John was last seen on February 17th, wearing a maroon shirt and tan pants. They also noted his distinctive tattoos. The Department of State acknowledged the situation, stating they were aware of the reports and ready to provide assistance. However, there was little they could do directly, as the investigation was in Mexico's jurisdiction. Fermina, meanwhile, was relentless in her search for answers. She contacted multiple state and government agencies, but felt frustrated by the lack of immediate response. Despite the obstacles, she refused to give up hope. John had always been a dedicated son. When Fermina had cancer, he had given her a double bone marrow transplant. "He made sacrifices just to extend my life," Fermina said, her voice breaking. This made his disappearance even more heartbreaking for the family. They couldn't understand how someone who had given so much could simply disappear. As days turned into weeks, the investigation continued, but leads were scarce. Retired FBI agent Jim Conway explained that while the FBI couldn't conduct investigations in Mexico, they could use liaisons to communicate with Mexican authorities. Despite these efforts, the family received little new information. The disappearance remained shrouded in mystery. John's friends in Mexico City confirmed that he had arrived on the night of February 16th and had taken an Uber to his Airbnb. Photos provided by a friend showed John's belongings left behind in the room. At around 11:30 p.m., he had gone to Montana Disco and Bar alone. This was his last known location. Fermina's anguish grew with each passing day. She issued a heartfelt plea through ABC 13 saying, "I am just saying that whoever holds my son, please let him go." She repeated, "Money can be replaced, but life cannot. We only have one life." Her words resonated with many as the community rallied around the family, hoping for John's safe return. The situation took a slightly hopeful turn when U.S. Representative Lizzie Fletcher's office became involved. They reached out to Fermina, promising to monitor the situation and assist in any way possible. Security services in Mexico City were also engaged in the search. Conway noted that Mexico City's security services were relatively sophisticated and had a good working relationship with the U.S. But as the days continued to pass, hope began to wane. Fermina's strength was tested as she continued to fight for her son's return. She reached out to news outlets, government officials, and anyone who might be able to help. The family's Filipino community also showed support, sharing John's story and praying for his safety. 19-year-old Manuel Reyes and his friend, 36-year-old Jesus Jesse Ramon Corona, were last seen in Lagos de Morena, a city in Jalisco, Mexico, at around 10:30 p.m. on May 2, 2021. They were heading out for tacos on Orozco y Jimenez Boulevard, the main street in the heart of Lagos de Morena. Manuel had come to Mexico from his home in Hayward, California, in early April to visit his sister. He also intended to spend time with his grandmother, who had fallen ill. Sadly, she passed away during his visit. Manuel's sister, who prefers to remain anonymous, said that they were supposed to hang out that night. They had been exchanging messages on WhatsApp throughout the evening. At 4 a.m., her worry grew as Manuel still hadn't returned home. Both Manuel and Jesse's phones were turned off, and there was no way to contact them. The days following their disappearance were filled with anxiety and fear for Manuel's family. His mother, living back in Hayward, was distraught. The last time they spoke, Manuel had assured her that he would be home soon on Thursday. Those words now echoed painfully in her mind as she refused to enter his room, unable to face his belongings and the memories they held. Lagos de Morena is known for its alarming number of disappearances. Residents report that many young people, typically aged between 13 and 22, have gone missing in the area. This troubling pattern adds to the gravity of Manuel and Jesse's situation. Manuel was last seen wearing gray pants, a blue and gray sweatshirt, gray sneakers, and a red cap. Jesse was last seen in jeans, a pink Aeropostale shirt, and blue Nike sneakers. These details were shared with the hope that someone might have seen them or could provide clues about their whereabouts. The case gained widespread attention due to Manuel's status as an American citizen. U.S. authorities began pressing local Mexican police to intensify their search efforts. This added pressure was crucial in a region where disappearances are alarmingly common and often unsolved. Diana Delgadino, head of social communication in Tepatiplan, a city near Lagos de Morena, stated that when a person is reported missing, all alerts are activated. They communicate between municipalities to close the circles and comb the area for clues. This protocol was put into action for Manuel and Jesse, but so far it has yielded no results. The fear that Manuel and Jesse might have been abducted by a criminal group is a real concern for their families. Maria Guadalupe Contreras, a family member, believes that they were taken by armed men. Back in Hayward, Manuel's mother clings to hope while grappling with the pain of his absence. "That's why I don't want to enter his room at all other than pray. I don't want to see his clothes or anything like that because it reminds me of when he used to go out," she said. The emotional toll on the family is immense, and the uncertainty of Manuel's fate only deepens their pain. On June 20, 2023, Robert Cantrell, a 62-year-old resident of Jacksonville, Florida, stepped off his flight at the Cancun International Airport. Cantrell, known for his adventurous spirit and love for real estate, had come to Cancun with a purpose. He was supposed to meet a real estate agent to check out some properties he was interested in purchasing. This trip, however, would take a dark and mysterious turn. Cantrell's trip to Cancun had been unusual from the start. He had initially traveled to Los Angeles to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Kol Ami Synagogue. From there, he was scheduled to fly to Cancun on June 18th. Unfortunately, he missed that flight, resulting in a series of missteps that took him off course to Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Austin, Texas, before finally reaching Cancun on June 20th. Despite the chaotic travel path, U.S. consular officials confirmed that Cantrell did indeed arrive in Cancun as planned. Upon landing, Cantrell made a hurried and panicked phone call to his ex-wife, reporting that his belongings had been stolen and he needed to return to Jacksonville. This was the last time anyone from his family heard his voice. His daughter, Lauren Cantrell, soon found herself at the center of a disturbing mystery. Just days later, on June 29th, a video surfaced on Facebook showing a disoriented Robert Cantrell. He was shirtless, shoeless, and babbling incoherently in English. His eyes were wild, and he appeared to have lesions on his body. The video, recorded by a local news reporter named Israel Vega, depicted Cantrell getting into an ambulance. Vega mentioned that Cantrell had been assaulted by a hotel security guard and was being taken to the U.S. Embassy. He called the ambulance to get treatment for Cantrell's dehydration and injuries, but since he had no money or IDs, he was turned over to the consulate. However, this transfer never happened. The sight of her father in such a state sent chills down Lauren's spine. She immediately filed a missing persons report with the Los Angeles Police Department, hired a private investigator, and enlisted the help of Texas EquiSearch, a search and recovery nonprofit. Lauren's determination to find her father led her to Cancun. Bringing flyers and guided by a local man who served as her translator, she posted missing person flyers throughout the city. Despite her efforts, the mystery of Robert Cantrell's whereabouts deepened. Many locals reported seeing him, but no concrete leads emerged. As the days passed, the case grew colder. The Quintana Roo Attorney General's office issued a missing person bulletin, and Lauren provided a DNA sample to aid in the investigation. The family's frustration and fear grew with each passing day. Lauren and her family struggled to balance hope and despair, searching tirelessly while grappling with the harsh reality of their situation. The GoFundMe campaign they had started to support the search efforts provided some financial relief, but could not ease the emotional burden. Lauren's heartfelt message on social media expressed the family's exhaustion and grief. She decided to step back from actively providing updates or engaging in the search process. In her message, Lauren painted a vivid picture of the emotional toll the search had taken on her family. Despite stepping back, Lauren remained a point of contact for authorities and promised to share any relevant updates. Friends and local supporters continued to distribute flyers and respond to potential sightings. The hope for Robert Cantrell's safe return lingered, though the reality of the situation grew increasingly grim.